Hello again. The long-awaited and much-delayed Shawcross report was finally released today. This is an independent inquiry commissioned by the government to examine how well the PREVENT programme is working. PREVENT is a strategy which accepts referrals from teachers, social workers, police and other professionals who fear that somebody is at risk of becoming radicalised and possibly drifting into carrying out acts of terrorism. Until a few years ago, the focus was on Islamists, but lately far more time has been spent on right-wing white people, often teenagers. In the description to this video, I give a link to the report so that viewers can read it for themselves. I also give a link to one or two newspaper articles about the release of the report. We read very early on in the report, on page 7, that it is clear that PREVENT is out of kilter with the rest of the counter-terrorism system and the UK terrorism threat picture. Islamist terrorism represents the primary terrorist threat to this country, consistently accounting for the majority of terrorist attack plots, both carried out and thwarted by the intelligence services. At present, 80% of the counter-terrorism police's network's live investigations are Islamist, while 10% are extreme right-wing. I hope that's clear. The threat is from Islamist fanatics, not really right-wing terrorists at all. For police dealing with counter-terrorism, 80% of their investigations involve Islamist extremists. What about the PREVENT programme, you ask? Well, we read that only 22% of PREVENT referrals for the year 20 to 21 concerned Islamism. You see the problem there. 80% of the counter-terrorist police activity is about Islamist terrorism, but 80% of PREVENT's activity is not. That's a bit worrying, isn't it? The difficulty is that PREVENT gets a lot of its referrals from schools, and teachers are a notoriously left-wing bunch who sympathise with immigrants and refugees and dislike anybody they perceive to be right-wing or racist. So it is they tend to turn a blind eye to mad fundamentalists, but become very concerned if they see a teenager who is opposed to immigration. They worry a lot too about incels because they are seen as being misogynist, which is a very bad thing these days. Incel is, by the way, short for men who are involuntarily celibate and sometimes develop a grudge against women generally because they can't get a girlfriend. Unpleasant perhaps, but it's hardly an ideology. And still less is it likely to lead to acts of terrorism. The Shawcross report goes into this at length. I urge viewers to read the thing for themselves rather than to blindly adopt my take on it. It's very straightforward and easy to follow, well worth a read. Another problem, according to the report, is that those referred are often treated as being in need of help as they live with vulnerable rather than dangerous individuals. So when a young man is on the verge of becoming an Islamist fanatic and is identified, he might be treated typically as though he had a mental health problem, rather than as though he might pose a threat to the lives of others. Shawcross also found that some of the Muslim organisations which PREVENT works with are themselves run by extremists, which is pretty unhelpful. The problem began a couple of years ago when the word went out that PREVENT was looking a bit Islamophobic because it spent so much time dealing with Muslims. It was suggested it would look much better if they could balance things up a bit by dealing with more white people. This then developed into a strategy whereby young people who expressed their dislike of immigration ended up being referred to PREVENT, together with those who were bitter because they couldn't get a girlfriend. Of course, it is not these people who are going to be detonating bombs or going on stabbing rampages, and so the project ended up wasting its time and not looking at those who actually might go off and plant a bomb. The Home Secretary has already agreed on the very day of publication to implement all the recommendations made in the Shawcross report without delay. This means that we should soon see efforts directed once more towards potential terrorists rather than at spotty teenagers who are ordering copies of the anarchist cookbook or complaining online that no girl will go out with them.